Shocking reunion, billionaire woman frozen in fear at airport 6 years after seeing ex-twins. The bustling airport was alive with movement. Travelers rushed from gate to gate, while the overhead announcements echoed like ghosts in the charged atmosphere. Among them stood Eleanor Waters, a woman whose presence seemed to silence the frenzy around her. She was sleek, dressed in an elegant suit, her deep auburn hair cascading perfectly down her shoulders. But something was off. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of fear and disbelief, as if she had stepped through a portal back in time. 6 years had passed since she had seen in the ex-husband who had shattered her world. Before she could catch her breath, a glimpse caught her eye. It was him. Mark, standing there, as if waiting for her, surrounded by a cloud of familiar unease. The weight of their shared history hung heavily, invisible yet palpable. He hadn't changed, still exuding that charm she had once found irresistible, but then it turned darker, haunted. The tightness in Eleanor's chest tightened even more as she fought the urge to flee, her limbs frozen in place. Around her, whispers erupted. People murmured about the billionaire woman who famously disappeared from the public eye after her divorce, leaving the world to speculate. Eyes darted her way, and the tension curled around her like a winter wind. Conversations went silent, replaced by the electric charge of anticipation. What would happen next? It was like watching a train barreling toward a cliff, unstoppable. And then it did. Their eyes locked. Time paused. A slight tremor in his hand. Panic surged through her, a lump forming in her throat. Could she handle seeing him? After all this time? When she had last walked away from him, it had been for a reason, a haunting reason that still echoed in her mind. The twins. Their faces flashed before her, two innocent little beings caught in a storm of adult chaos. What would Mark say? Would he mention them? Would he care? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Shockwaves pulsed through Eleanor as Mark stepped forward, his mouth moving, but no sound escaped. The crowd's breath held, hearts synchronized in a wild beat. What could he possibly want? In that moment, she felt the cold grip of history wrap around her throat. Would she crumble, or would she demand answers? The questions hung there like the heavy air before a storm, stirring a tempest deep inside her. Could this really be the moment that changed everything again? She had thought she was past it, but now? Now she stood on the edge, caught between fear and the desperate hope of closure. And just like that, the crowd inhaled as one, waiting for the answer that would rock Eleanor's world once more. What would happen next? Eleanor's pulse raced, a frantic rhythm that echoed in her ears. Was he really about to speak after all this time? She felt the anxiety ripping through her. The crowd's energy surged, pulling her deeper into the gravity of that long-lost moment. Mark's lips formed words, but the sound was lost in her racing thoughts. Eleanor, the way he said her name sent an electric jolt through her. Intimate yet foreign, it hung in the air like a whisper in a crowded room. She could barely draw a breath, the world around them fading into a blur. What did he want? Did he really think he could waltz back into her life after 6 years? For a heartbeat, a flicker of anger flared within her. But it was quickly snuffed out by the weight of uncertainty. Her mind reeled with memories of laughter, arguments, and the twins, the swirling emotions threatening to drown her. Eleanor, we need to talk, he said, his voice low. The intensity in his gaze held her captive. Need to talk? She echoed, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. You think you just show up and say that? After everything? The air thickened, and the crowd's murmurs morphed into whispers of disbelief. She could feel their eyes, their judgment. Suddenly it wasn't just a confrontation, it was a spectacle. Her heart thundered in her chest. How could he do this to her now? Mark took a step closer, and a wave of apprehension washed over her. I came back for them. His eyes softened, and that same familiar longing flickered across his face. I've missed the twins. Eleanor's breath hitched. The twins, her mind raced. Did he have the right to say that? To act as if he had been absent for merely a season? The weight of their shared children hung heavy between them. You missed what? She responded coldly, defiance hardening her voice. Your comfortable life, or the idea of being their father? He flinched at her words, a crack in his cool demeanor. No. It's more complicated than that. Is it? Complicated how? The fire in her spirit flared. The bewilderment twisted itself into determination. I made mistakes, Eleanor. I thought I could fix things, but... He hesitated, and for a moment, vulnerability pierced through the facade he wore. I'm sorry for everything. His admission hung in the air, a fragile thing balanced on the tip of a knife. There was something raw in his confession, a hint of sincerity that unnerved her. She struck back, refusing to let down her guard. Sorry won't change the past, Mark. 6 years of silence doesn't erase the hurt. Mark's expression twisted, a mix of regret and desperation. I've changed, Eleanor. I promise. I'm different now. The world around them began to fade, the bustling airport morphing into a vivid backdrop of their personal tempest. Yet, beneath the surface of her anger, a flicker of old feelings fought to resurface. Did he really mean it? But the memories of hurt screamed louder. She needed to decide. Did she dare entertain the idea of letting him back into their lives? Did she want her children tangled in this drama? Before she could formulate a response, the sound of a child's laughter broke through, a sharp contrast to the tension that enveloped them. Beyond them, a mother ushered her small daughter, a bundle of untainted joy, toward another part of the terminal. The child glanced their way, innocent and unburdened. Eleanor's heart twisted as the vision ignited a protective impulse. The twins were innocent too. Would exposing them to this chaos only cause more harm? Just then, Mark stepped even closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor, I know I can't change the past, but let me tell you why I came back. Their eyes locked, the weight of unspoken words heavy between them, stirring a whirlwind of questions. Was she ready to face whatever storm he had brought with him? As Eleanor prepared herself for the truth, a realization struck her, a truth that could change everything. Mark, what are you really hiding? The air shifted, thick with tension, as the other travelers faded away, leaving just the two of them locked in a moment that felt suspended in time. What secrets did he hold that could destroy everything she thought she knew? Eleanor's heart raced, matching the frenzy around them. She could feel the eyes of the crowd, their whispers swirling into a storm. Faces were turned toward her, anticipation simmering in the air. What was she going to say? What was she even feeling? The intensity of Mark's gaze was almost painful. It tore through her defenses, trying to unlock chambers of her heart she had long sealed. What am I hiding? Mark echoed, his voice cracking slightly. It's not about hiding. His hands shook as he fumbled for words, each syllable suffocating with importance. Eleanor, listen. She cut him off, a surge of anger coursing through her. You listen. You don't get to dictate this moment, Mark. Not after 6 years of silence. The words burst forth like a dam breaking, each one carrying the weight of betrayal and regret. Mark's expression faltered, the despair in his eyes sending a jolt of guilt through her. Maybe that was what he wanted. A reaction, a confrontation. The playful boy she once knew had morphed into a stranger weighed down by shadows. What if I told you that the silence wasn't just about me? He said, his voice barely above a whisper. What if I came back not just for the twins but for you? A lump formed in Eleanor's throat, raw with mixed emotions. Did he really mean that? The pain of the past hung like a thick fog around them, obscuring any hope of clarity. You can't just reappear and expect everything to be fine. I know, he replied, his voice softer. But I needed to tell you. There is something you don't know, something that a sudden commotion nearby stole her attention. A family hurried past, their laughter ringing like a bell in this heavy air. The mother caught her eye, an uncanny reflection of Eleanor's desires, happiness, harmony, a future untouched by anger. Eleanor turned back to Mark, her heart pounding. This isn't just about us anymore. What do you mean, something I don't know? His face paled, a flicker of turmoil crossing his features. Eleanor, please. Just let me explain. The pressing faces of those around them seemed to wait with bated breath, their curiosity merging with her own. After years of solitude, did she dare to exist in this reality again? What secrets lay beneath the surface of Mark's sudden return? Are you saying there's more to it? Eleanor asked, her voice trembling between fear and intrigue. What do you mean? I can't just tell you here, Mark said urgently. Let us step away. No. The fire in her heart flared. I won't be pulled into more of your games. Not again. But the truth was, she was drawn to him, despite all the hurt, the magnetism she couldn't deny. Mark's eyes bore into hers. It's bigger than we think. If you truly want to protect the twins, you have to know. You have to trust me. The crowd seemed to grow smaller, the world fading until it was just the two of them in this maelstrom. But the stakes were higher. Did she dare step into the unknown with him? Why now? Eleanor pressed, her voice steadying as determination seeped through her fear. If you have something to say that could disrupt our lives, why should I trust you? He inhaled sharply, frustration blooming around them like a wildfire. Because I found out what happened. His words trailed off, just as her heart sank. Don't you dare say another word until you explain what you're talking about. Eleanor hissed through gritted teeth. He stepped closer, desperation clawing at the corners of his expression. It's about your brother, Eleanor. Something you won't believe, but it's true. The air snapped rigid around them, electrifying the moment. The jarring mention of her brother sent a rush of tension through her veins. Confusion and dread replaced every other thought. Jack. Eleanor breathed, every bit of color draining from her face. As fear curled its icy fingers around her heart, she felt the ground shifting beneath her. What revelation could shatter her world now? Mark's eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and urgency. Yes, and it's worse than you think. What had he uncovered? The truth lay behind a veil heavier than anything she had faced before. Could she really confront the demons harbored in those years? Eleanor stood frozen, uncertainty flickering like a candle in a storm. And somewhere deep inside, a nagging thought crept in: how far was she willing to go to protect everything she loved? Little did she know, this was just the beginning. Eleanor felt the walls closing in as the weight of Mark's words pressed down on her. The bustling airport, once just a hub of travel and excitement, now felt like a cage, a gilded prison. Around her, travelers hurried by, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing at the heart of this reunion. Worse than I think? She echoed, her voice barely a whisper. She struggled against the tide of panic rising in her chest. Mark, what are you talking about? He hesitated, his expression shifting to one of determination, as if steeling himself for battle. I can't explain everything here. There are ears everywhere. It's about what's happening with Jack, Eleanor. His voice trembled, the urgency unmistakable. And it isn't good. The mention of her brother sent ice coursing through Eleanor's veins. Jack had always been her protector, her rock. A sense of dread twisted in her gut. What do you mean? She demanded, each word steeped in rising desperation. Mark's eyes darted around, scanning the crowd, then he leaned closer. There's something about his involvement in a business deal that went wrong. Something dangerous. Eleanor's breath caught, the color draining from her face. Business deal? What are you saying? What has he gotten himself into? Mark took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as if holding back a tide of emotions. I didn't want to pull you into this, but I had to. He's in over his head. There are people who— he glanced back again, his voice lowering, who might want to hurt him. A panic surged inside her, sharp and gnawing. Hurt him? Why didn't he say anything? I can't believe this. Because he thought he could handle it on his own. He didn't want to worry you, Mark replied, pain etched deeply in his features. He reached out, his hand brushing against Eleanor's in a desperate plea. But now I think it's worse than he anticipated. He needs us, Eleanor. He needs you. The crowd around them blurred into a haze as Eleanor battled through her thoughts, terror firing through her bloodstream. Jack was always the strong one. The thought of him being vulnerable, of him needing protection sent shudders through her spine. Why should I trust you? She asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. You left. You have no idea what it was like for me after Mark's eyes burned with remorse. I know I hurt you. And I can't take that back. But I came back for a reason. I need you to believe that I would never do this without cause. For a fleeting second, for the briefest moment, Eleanor felt the old spark flicker. But it was swallowed by the chill of her reality. Why you, Mark? Why didn't Jack come to me himself? Because he's scared, Eleanor. Scared of putting you in danger, Mark said, desperation edging his voice. And he's been too proud to admit he needs help. Eleanor's heart raced, a whirlwind of emotions battling within her. As anger and fear twisted into codependency, she caught sight of familiar faces in the throng of people. A woman with bright blonde hair scurried past with a child. Was it just her imagination, or did the child look just like Jack? Wait, she murmured, her mind racing. If this is about Jack, is it tied to the twins? Those people at the park, they were looking for him. Mark tensed, the truth hanging heavily between them. Yes, and if we don't act fast, he stopped abruptly, eyes wide with fear. They're looking for more than just him. The world tilted beneath her. The stakes had transformed from personal pain to a dangerous, intertwining crisis. Could she really trust him to help her save Jack? Silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. Mark's gaze bore into hers, a question lingering. Would she stand with him against the shadows closing in around their lives? Eleanor took a deep breath, steeling herself against the tide of uncertainty. All right. I'll trust you for now. But promise me, if this goes south, no games. I need you to be honest. Absolutely, he assured, and the intensity of the moment crackled in the air. But as Eleanor steeled herself for the fight ahead, a question loomed. How deep did the darkness run, and what pull would it have on her family, the family they both shared? With uncertainty echoing in her mind, she wondered if she would regret her choice to confront the past. Little did she know, the truth was about to unravel in ways they both could never foresee. Eleanor's thoughts raced like a thunderstorm in her mind, dark clouds clashing with the unsettling possibility that the life she knew was about to spiral into chaos. She forced herself to breathe, each inhale tasting of metal and anxiety. Where do we start? She asked, urgency lacing her words. The noise of the airport felt suffocating, an unwelcome backdrop to the personal hell unfolding in her heart. Mark's eyes narrowed in determination. We get to him before anyone else does. He might be hiding at a friend's place. The less people know, the better. They darted through the bustling crowd, Eleanor's heart pounding in her ears, matching the hurried footfalls of travelers. Each face that passed by felt like a potential enemy. She tried to grasp the gravity of what Mark had shared, shadows looming over Jack, whispers of danger. Her chest tightened. Do you know what this deal is about? Who is involved? She pressed, desperate for more information. I wish I did, Mark confessed, shaking his head. He hesitated, urgency mixing with worry as he glanced around. I only overheard bits, rumors of money, drugs, maybe even violence. Jack got mixed up with the wrong crowd. He thought it wouldn't end up like this. His voice cracked, regret hanging thick in the air. They reached the parking lot, and Eleanor scanned the rows of cars, her anxiety amplifying. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. What if he can't be saved? What if they already have him? Mark placed his hand on her shoulder, grounding her. We won't let that happen. I swear. Jack is more resilient than you know. They climbed into Mark's car, a nondescript sedan, and raced down the road. Every corner they turned felt like a labyrinth, twisting with dread and uncertainty. Eleanor wrung her hands together, debating whether she should voice the another shadow hanging over her. What if he doesn't want help? She finally blurted. What if he's in too deep and thinks he can handle it? Mark's expression darkened as he turned onto a quieter street, the city blurring past them. Then we'll make him see reason. But believe me, Eleanor, if he's entangled with those people, he won't be able to think straight. This isn't just a bad day at work, it's life and death. She nodded, the apprehension pooling in her stomach. Jack had always been good at keeping things from her, especially when he felt he was protecting her. But this was different, the stakes were too high. As they pulled into a narrow driveway, sat a simple bungalow shrouded in shadow. It looked desolate, as if untouched by light for years. This is it, Mark said, his voice filled with determination. He turned to Eleanor, locking eyes with her. Are you ready? Ready for what? She whispered, fear creeping into her voice. To face whatever's lurking in the dark. They stepped into the cool air, the tension suffocating. Mark led the way, moving carefully, each step echoing their uncertainty. Just as they reached the front door, Eleanor noticed a flicker inside, a movement behind the sheer curtains. Her breath caught. Do you see that? She asked, pointing. Mark nodded, and they exchanged a final glance, adrenaline coursing through them. One deep breath, one shared resolve. If Jack was on the other side of that door, she was prepared for anything, even the possibility that he might not be alone. Then, just as Mark raised his hand to knock, a loud crash came from within, followed by the unmistakable sound of shouting. Eleanor's heart dropped. Jack! She called out, her voice tearing through the silence, swallowed by the anticipation of what awaited behind that door. But the shout was met with silence. The air turned electric with tension, and Eleanor felt a chill creep down her spine. Something was horribly wrong. Go! Mark commanded, pushing the door open. Just then, a figure stumbled out, darkened by shadows but unmistakable. Eleanor's heartbeat hammered in her chest. Who or what had just emerged from that house? Were they too late? As the figure stepped into the light, a gasp escaped Eleanor's lips. What she saw through. Everything they had prepared for into disarray. What had they walked into? The figure that stumbled into the light was not Jack. It was a woman, disheveled and wide-eyed, her clothes torn and streaked with dirt. Eleanor caught a glimpse of fear etched into her features, and for a moment, she felt her heart lurch with empathy. Help! Please! The woman's voice creaked, thick with desperation. Eleanor instinctively stepped forward, but Mark halted her, eyes darting, scanning the surroundings. Stay back, he hissed, a protective instinct flaring. It was one thing to see the chaos on the news, it was another to stand on the precipice of it, feeling its weight pressed down on her. Eleanor swallowed hard, her throat dry. Who are you? Where's Jack? The woman leaned against the doorframe, panting, her gaze shifting anxiously. They took him. I tried to get away, they were yelling, and her voice broke, and tears streamed down her dirt-stained cheeks. Eleanor's chest tightened. Whoever had Jack was powerful and ruthless. What do you know? Tell us everything. Mark glanced back at Eleanor, his expression taut. Eleanor, we can't linger. We need to move. Eleanor shook her head defiantly, her heart racing as she faced the woman. No. If she has information, we can't just leave her here. What did they look like? Who are they? The woman hesitated, eyes darting as if processing the danger surrounding them. They wear masks. They have tattoos, and they're everywhere, even in the city. Jack thought he could stay out of it, but her voice faltered. Thought he could stay out of what? Mark pushed, urgency bleeding into his tone. Out of the deal, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. With the cartel. He got involved with this guy, I don't even know his name, but I heard he's dangerous, they've been tracking him. Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her. A cartel? Jack was tangled up in something far more sinister than imagined. We have to find him. We have to help him. With what time? They'll come for you next if they realize you're here, Mark replied, his voice laced with panic. The woman looked between them, desperation mounting. I saw where they took him. A warehouse by the river. But you have to hurry. Eleanor felt dread swirl in her stomach, but it ignited a spark of determination. Let us go, she urged. Hold on. Mark said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. We can't just rush in blindly. They're armed, they'll be waiting. Then what do we do? Eleanor demanded, raw insistence in her voice. Mark brushed a hand through his hair, weighing options. We have to come up with a plan. We can't go in without backup. If anything happens, Eleanor's heart sank. The thought of losing him too was unbearable. We don't have time. If we wait too long, he could be gone forever. Before Mark could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway of the bungalow. A man, silhouetted against the fading light, stood with a menacing stance. Mark pushed Eleanor behind him, his physique blocking her view. Time's up, the man said, a smirk twisting his lips. He stepped forward, revealing a gleaming weapon strapped at his side, eyes gleaming with a predatory glint. Run! Mark shouted, and Eleanor felt the adrenaline spike as she grabbed the woman's hand, pulling her away from the threat. They tore down the driveway, hearts racing, prayers whispered in fear. As they reached the end of the driveway, Eleanor risked a glance back. The man's figure loomed, dark and formidable, a chilling reminder that they were being hunted. It's not safe. The woman cried, but Eleanor's resolve only hardened. It doesn't matter. We have to get to Jack. A gut-wrenching sound followed them, echoing in the stillness. Laughter, draped in menace. The man hadn't followed, but the threat hung heavy in the air. Behind them, the shadows were closing in. Do you really think you can save him? The woman asked, breathless and trembling. Doubt crept into Eleanor's heart, like a fog swallowing her hope. What if it's already too late? Eleanor gritted her teeth, every fiber of her being screaming to push forward. But the uncertainty loomed larger than ever. And somewhere in the place they were heading, Jack was waiting. But would they find him before the darkness consumed them both? The skyline ahead twisted, bringing the distant glow of flames into view. Desperate, Eleanor whispered a prayer, ready to face whatever awaited them in that place. What lurked in the shadows of the warehouse, and would they be ready for what was inside? As they sprinted toward the warehouse, Eleanor felt a rush of air against her skin, each breath laced with a mix of panic and determination. The distant glow of flames painted her surroundings in a sinister orange hue, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms in the night. What if we run into more of them? The woman gasped, glancing over her shoulder, wild-eyed. What if they're waiting? Mark kept his strides purposeful, his jaw clenched tight. We need to stick to the shadows. They have the advantage in the open. Move quietly. Eleanor squeezed the woman's hand, her heart pounding as they slipped through the narrow spaces between the trees, trying to remain unseen. The adrenaline soared, driving them forward. They darted past a rusty vehicle, parked haphazardly, its windows dark and shattered. It was a haunting reminder of the chaos lurking nearby. The warehouse loomed ahead, a menacing structure silhouetted against the firelit sky. The air was thick with tension, like the calm before a storm, the world hanging on the edge of something terrible. Do you think he's in there? Eleanor barely managed to breathe out the question, fear biting at her thoughts like icy claws. I have to believe he is. We're going to find him, Mark replied, though his voice held an edge of uncertainty. Eleanor's resolve flickered but wouldn't fade. Just as they approached the entrance, she caught sight of movement. Two shadowy figures loitered near the entrance, their hushed tones slipping through the cracks of their violent world. Stay low, Mark whispered urgently. Eleanor dropped into a crouch, her heart thrumming in her ears. She peered past the crates stacked against the wall, focusing intently on the figures ahead. What are they saying? She mouthed to Mark. Can't hear, he responded, squinting to sharpen his focus. Fear coiled tightly in Eleanor's chest, ready to burst. She could barely see their faces, but the menace was palpable, and their body language screamed of danger. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from within the warehouse, a cacophony of metal against concrete. What was that? The woman recoiled, her eyes wide with fear. Something's happening, Mark said, glancing at Eleanor. We can't wait. We need to get in there. Eleanor nodded, heart racing. They slipped to the side, trying to find another way in. Their ears perked up at the sounds drifting out, shouting, followed by a familiar voice echoing in the distance. Jack! Eleanor whispered, adrenaline igniting every nerve within her. The urgency pushed her forward, but Mark gripped her arm tightly. Be careful, he hissed. As they crept around the side of the warehouse, they came across a grim sight. Graffiti splattered across the walls declared the territory of a criminal empire, dark symbols of power and violence, but it was the sight through a broken window that froze Eleanor's heart in its tracks. She could see forms moving inside, menacing figures circling around a lone figure tied to a chair. Jack! No! We have to do something. Eleanor's voice trembled, raw desperation clawing at her throat. Mark's expression hardened. We can't go in without a plan. We need to draw them away first. Draw them away? Eleanor's insides twisted. What if he's hurt? He won TB if we act smart. Listen, let me create a distraction. You stay hidden and wait for my signal. We can't rush this. Eleanor hesitated, horror and trust battling inside her. She wanted to scream, to charge in without thinking, but the reality of their situation was like ice in her veins. Okay, but hurry, she finally whispered, her eyes never leaving Jack's form. Please. Mark nodded, steeling himself before darting silently around the corner, leaving her with the weight of their plan. Eleanor breathed deeply, fingers trembling as she crouched low behind debris. The sounds of raucous laughter and shouting bubbled up, drowning her heartbeat. Then came a deafening crash, a sound that could only signify danger. She held her breath, hoping Jack would be okay, praying for strength. But what choice would they make when the true horror inside the warehouse began to unfold? And would they fight the darkness together, or would the shadows claim them first? The crashing noise faded, replaced by a tense silence that seemed to throb with Eleanor's heartbeat. She peered once more through the cracked window, desperation clawing at her throat as Jack's figure remained bound and vulnerable. A heavy-set man loomed over him, chuckling darkly as he brandished a glinting knife. Her blood ran cold. Come on, Mark, she muttered under her breath. She felt the heat rising behind her, fear settling like a stone in her chest. Eleanor's instincts screamed at her to act, to burst in there, to save Jack regardless of the plan. But deep down, she knew rushing wouldn't just endanger herself, it could cost Jack his life. Suddenly, there was a thud, and the door of the warehouse crashed open. Out stepped Mark, as quiet as a shadow, but with a booming cry that startled Eleanor. Hey! Out here! Her heart dropped. Mark was out in the open. Eleanor stifled a gasp, horrified. Distract them. He yelled, his voice echoing through the night. You'll regret it if you don't join me. He glanced back at Eleanor briefly, urgency burning in his eyes. Hastily, she clutched her wrist, fighting the urge to rush to him. She stayed glued to her spot, every nerve ending on fire, as the men near Jack turned their attention to Mark. Eleanor could see their heads pop up like startled crows, expressions shifting from surprise to malicious glee. Just a little mouse lost in the dark? One sneered, stepping forward. Another man snickered, we've got a guest. This was her moment. Eleanor could almost hear her own thoughts, dampened by fear. Would Mark's distraction hold? Would they attack him and leave Jack unguarded? She had to take that gamble. Crouching low, she hurried to the side of the warehouse, searching for any opening that might allow her inside. The faint sounds of shouting erupted once again, a clash of voices rising. Mark was holding them off, but for how long? In a panic, she spotted a half-open door leading into a darkened corridor. The smell of damp and decay wafted out, but she ignored the stench and slipped inside. Once in, her heart raced as she sprinted down the hallway, her breath quickening. Shadows loomed everywhere, flickering in the dim light overhead, but now she was committed. She could hear voices more clearly as she neared the main area. "Are you gonna talk?" The heavy man's voice echoed, menacing. Jack's almost defiant reply came through, weak but firm. "Go to hell." Eleanor's resolve stiffened. She made her move, rounding the corner into the main room. The chaos and brutality spread before her like a scene from a nightmare. Mark was fighting with one of the men, dodging brutal punches, while another held Jack still in the chair. Her breath caught in her throat as a flash of metal glinted ominously. She could see Mark grasping for something at his side, a makeshift weapon. Time stopped. "Let him go," Eleanor shouted, startling them all. In that instant, all eyes turned to her, shocked confusion blending into rage. Eleanor felt her heart pound in her ears, and it was now or never. Before they could react, she lunged forward, eyes locked on Jack. She had to free him. But then, the world tilted upside down as heavy hands seized her from behind, yanking her back just as she reached for Jack. Adrenaline surged, and she fought against the grip. Mark was shouting. Jack was straining against his ties. This was all spiraling out of control. The danger was palpable, electric as if it had form. Then everything erupted, a loud roar of footsteps and shouting as reinforcements suddenly poured in through the half-open door, flooding the room with chaos. What were those unexpected voices? Allies? Enemies? Eleanor's heart raced as she looked around, trying to make sense of the scene unraveling before her. In that moment of distraction, one thing was clear: everything was about to change, but she had no idea if it would end in despair or salvation. As someone drew nearer, laughter erupted, cutting through the tension. "Welcome to your reckoning." What was about to unfold, and who were these new arrivals? The blend of fear and hardened resolve filled her as she braced for what was next. The chaos exploded around her. Voices collided like thunder, confusion amplifying the wild clashes of fists and bodies. Eleanor thrashed in the grip of the man behind her, his hold like iron, cutting off her escape. She could barely focus on Mark's fierce struggle or Jack's desperate plea as the room erupted in turmoil. It was like a twisted carnival, the laughter of the heavy man echoing against the sounds of violence. "Get off me!" she screamed, kicking out with all her strength. A hand smacked across her mouth, silencing her. The man's breath was hot and foul against her ear, sending a chill down her spine. "You'll regret this, sweetheart," he muttered darkly. Mark had been outnumbered. Just as Eleanor strained against her captor, she caught a glimpse of Jack. His breath was ragged, and desperation filled his eyes. He was fighting against the ropes, straining against his bonds as if his life depended on it. And it did. Eleanor's mind raced. She remembered the metal she'd seen glinting in Mark's hand. It could be a key or a weapon, anything could turn the tide. She had to focus and find a way to help, but her body felt paralyzed with terror. Suddenly, a new voice rose above the rest, commanding and authoritative. "Stand down." The reinforcements' faces blurred with the shadows pushed their way forward. Their uniforms gleamed, and insignias shone in the dim light, creating a momentary distraction. Mark saw them and his expression flickered, hope igniting just briefly. But then, laughter rolled from the heavy man. "You think you can save them? Come on. It'll be a sweet reunion." With that, he wrenched Eleanor backward, spinning her around to face him. A glint of steel flashed before her eyes, a knife raised. "Mark!" she shouted, fear puncturing her words, but still, she felt a surge of determination rise with her heart's hammering. Mark was still fighting, but he was surrounded. He could barely hold his ground. The heavy man was distracted, but danger lurked behind every grim expression and tight grip. "Let her go!" Mark roared, eyes aflame with fury, but the heavy man merely smirked. Eleanor's heart raced. The last vestige of her fear snapped. In a desperate move, she surged forward, catching the man off guard. It was a gamble, a wild throw of fate. Her foot connected sharply with his knee. He stumbled, rage painting his face. "Get away!" she gasped, pushing free. Adrenaline surged through her veins like wildfire. She was free. Eleanor charged forward, her pulse racing as she sought out Jack, every instinct screaming at her to reach him. The chaos rang in her ears like a cacophony of thunder. She dodged one of the reinforcements, feeling the urgency boil. But as she reached Jack, two men closed in, wild eyes hunted for violence. She could feel their breath against her skin, hot and menacing. "Jack!" she cried, desperate. "Hold on." With both hands trembling, she dove into her pockets, the weight of the knife suddenly fresh in her memory. She could almost taste the metallic tang of fear. But it didn't matter. She had to cut him free. As Jack's eyes locked onto hers, the connection sparked a silent promise shared between two who had fought too long to give in. "Let us end this," he shouted, an intensity flooding his voice. Before Eleanor could respond, the heavy man was on her again, breath hot on her neck, fury boiling. "No one gets away." Rage and determination tore through Eleanor as she turned to face him. She could play her part, take charge. Was this the moment to become their reckoning? With her heart pounding, the knife felt heavy in her palm, a weight that bore down with every heartbeat. But as she steadied herself, another voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "You're outnumbered. Drop it." Eleanor's heart raced at the ambush ahead. They had come, but who were they really? "Time to choose," the voice continued, slicing through the tension. The threat escalated as adrenaline ignited the fear inside Eleanor, but it was now or never. Would she join the fight or retreat into the darkness? Uncertainty loomed, shadowing her resolve. What would she decide when moments frayed at the edges, when lives depended on a single shocking move? The air crackled, and the weight of the moment fell on her shoulders, heavy and immediate. Eleanor swallowed hard, but she had a choice. Would she seize her moment or falter under the fear? Before she could answer, the heavy man lunged forward again, and it became loud, chaotic, and wild. In the swirling storm of conflict, one question screamed above the rest: how far would she go to save him? The chaos in the warehouse crescendoed into a whirlwind of sound and fury. Eleanor felt her heart pound like a drum, urging her to act, to fight amidst the swirling storm of danger. She took a shaky breath and focused on Jack, her eyes locked onto his, desperate for strength. "Jack!" she shouted again, her voice cutting through the clamor. Mark and the reinforcements battled fiercely with the thugs, grunts and curses filling the air as fists flew. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She clutched the knife in her pocket, the cold metal pressing against her palm, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. Could she really use it? Was she ready to embrace the chaos? Then, in a sudden flicker, hope surged as she saw a group of reinforcements crash through the door, their uniforms gleaming under the flickering lights. "FBI! Put down your weapons!" their leader shouted, the authority in her voice breaking through the tension. For a second, the heavy man hesitated, eyes darting toward the sound. That second was everything. With a roar, Eleanor burst forward, using every ounce of strength and adrenaline to push past the combatants. She dodged a fist that flew past her and reached Jack, who was still bound, eyes wide with urgency. "I'm coming," she called, determination slicing through her fear, but as she reached him, the heavy man was on her again, his fury reigniting. "You think you can save him?" He spat at Eleanor, his hands reaching for her. Eleanor didn't flinch. She'd come too far to back down now. "You'll regret this," she yelled, lunging forward with the knife. It wasn't just a blade, it was a barrier against all the darkness that threatened her family. With a swift motion, she sliced through the ropes binding Jack. "Get up. We have to go," she urged, the urgency in her voice cutting through his shock. Jack sprang to his feet, eyes flashing with relief as he rubbed his wrists. "Eleanor," he breathed, the realization flooding through him. "You shouldn't have come." Mark was still dealing with the heavy man, their struggle a blur of furious energy. Eleanor. Jack. Get out. He shouted, desperation spilling into the fight. Eleanor grasped Jack's arm, their connection stronger than ever. We're leaving together. She turned to pull him toward the exit, but before they could escape, the heavy man sprang forward again, fury etched on his face. Not so fast. He lunged at Jack, fists flying that instant. Time froze for Eleanor. She moved instinctively, stepping in front of Jack. No. She yelled, adrenaline surging through her. Then, the crackle of authority chimed with finality as the FBI agents uncoiled into action. They surrounded the heavy man, shoving him backward. Put down your weapon. Their voices raised in unison, echoing in the chaos. The heavy man stumbled, his bravado fading amid the sudden threat. In a split second, he was overpowered, hands cuffed behind his back. Eleanor felt the world spin dizzyingly. It wasn't just survival now, they were reclaiming their lives. But there was no more room for games. Let us go. Mark barked, urgency filling every shard of his voice as they darted for the warehouse exit. Eleanor and Jack followed closely behind, the thrill of escape grasping at their hearts. But just as they reached the threshold, another threat loomed. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man, cloaked in menace, his eyes cold and calculating. Not so fast, he hissed, stepping forward, a glint of metal in his grasp. Eleanor felt the air thicken with dread. Mark reacted instinctively, pushing her and Jack behind him. Get down. He shouted, ready to protect them at all costs, but before he could move, the figure drew something from his pocket, a slip of paper, clenched tightly, his voice dripping with menace. You think you've won? This is just the beginning. Eleanor's heart dropped as the realization settled in. What do you mean? She demanded, desperation edging her voice. The man's lips curled into a sinister smile. There are others watching this isn't over. Don't you see? Just then, the sound of sirens echoed outside, growing louder as law enforcement closed in. Eleanor's senses heightened, fear mingled with fierce determination. We will fight for our family. We won't let this go. Mark turned to her, his expression fierce. We'll keep moving. Nothing will hold us back. As the reinforcements flanked the figure, the air filled with a tense energy. You're under arrest. They commanded, the chaos twisting toward resolution as the danger began to dissipate. Eleanor stood beside Jack and Mark, their solidarity stronger than ever. The darkness may have tried to consume them, but they would not falter. Together, they had survived, ready to face whatever storms loomed ahead. With adrenaline coursing through her veins, Eleanor grasped Jack's hand, warmth blooming between them. They would heal. They would fight. They would be whole. As they exited the chaotic warehouse, the moonlight shone down like a beacon, illuminating the path ahead. They were not just survivors, they were warriors, ready to reclaim their lives and protect one another from the shadows that sought to pull them apart, and with that resolve, they stepped into the dawn of a new beginning. Now, I need you to take action. Subscribe immediately so you don't miss the next exclusive stories unraveling in this gripping saga. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to be part of this community. Your voice matters.